Well, it wasn't pretty. In fact, it was pretty darn ugly out of the gate, but the Seahawks get the victory. Mike Macdonald 1-0 after beating the Denver Broncos. What led to the comeback in the second half? We're going to be breaking it all down here on our latest post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. Glad to be joined here in our first regular season post-game version of Locked On Seahawks. And we're really excited to be breaking down the Seahawks Week 1 win over the Denver Broncos. Glad to be joined by my co-host, Connor Benintendi, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're in nearby Sammamish or you are across the country over in Boston, get ready for next week's game. We appreciate each and every one of you. The Seahawks moving to 1-0, but it was not easy. This is a game that kind of played out scoreboard-wise the way that I thought it was going to, a closer than anticipated game with plenty of Week 1 mistakes, but the way that it unfolded was not necessarily the way that I anticipated, especially with the offense spotting the Denver Broncos 10 points. Connor, I think we'd be remiss not to kick this thing off looking at this game. Yes, the Seahawks win 26-20, but the juxtaposition, the comparison between the first and the second half, the 180-degree switch up on the offensive side of the football, that really was all the difference in this game.
Yeah, it was night and day, Corbin. I mean, we were just talking about it before the show briefly. The difference between the offense in particular, the defense really didn't change much from first to second half, but the offense, just a completely different performance. They couldn't do anything. The offensive line collapsing almost right after the snap, particularly at the guard positions, and also once Stone Forsythe came into the game, that wasn't pretty either. But the adjustments were made in the second half. You got to give credit to Ryan Grubb in particular, just because, and the players did after the game, Corbin, give credit to Ryan Grubb, Kenneth Walker in particular, stating that his offensive coordinator made the necessary adjustments at halftime in order to change this thing around. And it was night and day, really, especially when you look at Kenneth Walker. Whenever I was watching the game, it was just like, okay, Kenneth Walker is taking over right now. This is not, and it was partially because of what Grubb was scheming up. I know you've already dove into it, Corbin, just on the double trap on the touchdown that you were talking about. I know you were all juiced up about that one, as was I. Just to see two guards pulling on opposite sides of the line, it's beautiful. But point is, Kenneth Walker in particular, 19 yards in the first half, 84 in the second half. And that's just a night and day difference in terms of the run game. And Geno Smith looked a lot more comfortable. The offensive line was holding up a whole lot better. But you got to give credit also to Mike Macdonald getting his first win as Seattle's head coach. And just, he had a game plan coming into this game. You could tell that he was ready to go. The defensive players were ready to go, and they did not give up hardly an inch. I mean, 15 yards over the first 10 offensive plays for Denver in this game, and then it was only good from there as well. So really, really impressed with the defense, and really, really impressed with the second half adjustments as well.
Yeah, it really was. It was a really impressive set of adjustments by Ryan Grubb. But before we really dive into that, I want to look at just how putrid things were in the first half for the offense, because that was really the storyline in the first two quarters, is the inability to stop themselves from self-destructing. Literally 2 plays after the game had started. I mean, Geno Smith was sacked the first play, immediate pressure. Nobody's open. Second play, Tyler Lockett looked like he might have been open, and that's who he was trying to get the football to. But again, DJ Jones, the defensive tackle, wraps him up below his knees, and it was kind of an ugly-looking hit. There was nothing illegal about it, but it was kind of a rough hit. The ball ends up being way underthrown and lands right in Alex Singleton's fingertips for the interception, and suddenly the Broncos are already deep in Seahawks territory. And then you had 2 safeties in the first half. One of them set up by a D. Williams muffed punt. The other one, Julian Love intercepted it past the 1-yard line, which that's a good thing to get an interception, but it stinks that it happened there and it could have been in the end zone. Nonetheless, both of those times resulted in safeties. So you're looking at 7 points right there that were gifted to the Denver Broncos because of offensive miscues. The Seahawks were averaging barely over 4 yards per play in the first half. They were 1 for 5 on third down, 102 total yards. Aside from Geno Smith's 34-yard rushing touchdown, which he showed off way more speed than I've seen from Geno Smith at any point. He juked PJ Locke out. That was the one highlight on offense. Otherwise, this was a disaster piece. But let's fast forward to that second half now. As you were talking, I'm going to mention the run game because that's really what got this game going for the Seahawks in the right direction. There was a lot of zone running in the first half, and it was not working. The Seahawks had, away from Geno Smith's 34-yard run, 19 total rushing yards as an offense. They were averaging barely over 2 yards per carry. It was basically a non-existent run game. They come out in the second half. Ryan Grubb dusts off his playbook, says, you know what? We're going to run some gap schemes. We're going to get physical at the line of scrimmage. I'm going to let my guards get in the move a little bit. Let's go mash some people. They come out and they get a 5-yard run, a 6-yard run, and then they get a 15-yard run on a power play with a beautiful block on a pulling guard assignment by Laken Tomlinson. A couple plays later, they get the 23-yard touchdown by Ken Walker III. And again, you mentioned it, the double trap. I had not seen that in Ryan Grubb's repertoire at Washington. It was not a play that I'd seen them run, but seeing both guards on traps, they had the strong side defensive tackle and the edge rusher, Baron Browning, both unblocked, and they both got hit by these trappers coming from the guard spots. Ken Walker III makes a guy miss. Noah Fant does just enough without holding on for a penalty. Next thing you know, Ken Walker is doing a somersault into the end zone, and the Seahawks are back in front, and it's a lead they do not relinquish the rest of the game. But that really set the tone for the rest of this football game because the passing game was able to start getting going after that series with the way the Seahawks ran the football. Geno Smith looked much more comfortable. He threw a 30-yard touchdown to Zach Charbonnet, was winging the ball around. Geno Smith completed almost 80% of his passes in the second half. So he was playing much more like the Geno Smith we expected to see. And it really helped because of the schematic adjustments, being able to take some of that pressure the offensive line was giving up early off of him. And we just saw the offense look much better. There obviously were things to work on in the second half too, but it was a night and day difference. And that's the offense you're hoping to see the Seahawks have more consistently moving forward.
Yeah, Geno Smith was incredibly fortunate, and it was also just a testament to his capabilities to come out with the stat line that he did, Corbin. I think, let me pull it up here real quick. 18 for 25, 171 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. The fact that he came out, like you said, with a pretty darn good completion percentage, given the whole first half and the way things were going, it was really a miracle that he was able to salvage that game. And this is where a lot of people want to pile on Geno Smith, is trying to say that his decision-making in certain scenarios is not sound and certain things like that. But when you have the offensive line that he had in that first half, what is he supposed to do? There's nowhere for him to go with the ball. He doesn't have time to go through his reads. He doesn't have time to find his open receivers. What do you want the guy to do? He's getting the ball downed at his half-yard line 3 different times. I mean, I looked it up at halftime just to see what the record was for safeties in a game, and it's 3 by the Los Angeles Rams in 1984. We almost got to that point in this game. It was really, really close. It was really, really close, Corbin, but they evaded that situation. So whenever you look at this game from a bird's eye view, I remember sitting there at halftime and just thinking, this offense, what they're going through right now is fixable, right? Like what they're dealing with right now, this is all game football, situational football things that are just going wrong. But the defense is what stood out to me as if the defense was having issues, we'd have a whole lot more problems here for this Seahawks team, especially being led by Mike Macdonald in his debut. And the fact that they were just solid through and through, that's what you wanted to see. I mean, the safeties particularly, we're going to get to it, Corbin, but the safeties were just incredible. I mean, you have Julian Love lead the team with 10 solo tackles. You often look at that and you're going to say, well, you don't want your safeties having 10 solo tackles, but those were mostly near the line of scrimmage. And that's just the way that the scheme was going, and they were just flying around, making a lot of hits. So I was just really satisfied with how that defense played, and the fact that Grubb was able to come back and scheme up those runs, particularly from Ken Walker. He had that second touchdown that was negated. And we didn't see a whole lot of Zach Charbonnet in the run game, only had 8 carries for 12 yards, which I think we'll see a lot more of that as the season progresses and both of them kind of fall into their roles. But obviously he had that nice long touchdown there from Geno Smith just on a simple little wheel route where Denver lost him as well too. So everybody managed to get their little hits in this game offensively, even with all of the downs that came and the punches they rolled with them. And I was really happy to see the way that they finished the game.
Yeah, I think this was a game that you saw some things that were missing from this Seahawks team the last couple of years. The tackling in open field was so much better than we have seen the last 2 or 3 years. The Seahawks were swarming to the football. They were finishing most of their plays when it came to tackles. And then on the offensive side of the ball, being able to get that run game going and showing the ability to adapt. And that was just something we did not see the last few years, particularly in the run game in the second half of games. And so seeing Ryan Grubb being able to do that, scheme up some stuff that, and quite frankly, the double trap thing, not something that I've seen very often. So pulling some different types of concepts out to take advantage of what the Denver Broncos were doing, showing the ability to adjust on the fly in a game. Those are all really good signs. Obviously, a ton to work on. This was far from a perfect game for the Seahawks, but they get the W. Mike Macdonald gets that first win. We're going to continue breaking down this victory with our game balls coming up next. Which players stood out on offense, defense, and special teams? We'll get to that up next here on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Bet on everything from Geno Smith's MVP odds to Byron Murphy II's Rookie of the Year odds, even Uchenna Nwosu coming back hopefully next week and starting his Comeback Player of the Year campaign. Just throw in a $5 bet, and you'll get a free trial to NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast post-game edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined on today's show by my co-host, Connor Benintendi. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks officially 1-0 in the Mike Macdonald era. It was not pretty. It was pretty ugly most of the time. Safeties galore, gift wrapping points, and yet the Seahawks found a way to get it done at Lumen Field. And Mike Macdonald has the highest win percentage in Seahawks coach history. 100% right now, Connor. Can't beat that. Let's get to the game balls, shall we? And this was an interesting one in terms of trying to figure out game balls on the offensive side of the football. And I know that you're going to go with an old standby that maybe we had just forgotten about a little bit too much going into this season in Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, I've got to give Tyler Lockett. I always say give him his flowers. I'm going to go away from that on this one, Corbin. I'm just going to give this man his credit where it's due. I've been talking all offseason since I came on the show, Corbin, about how I expected Jackson Smith-Njigba to really step into that wide receiver 2 role. And I don't necessarily think that's not going to happen, but this was a classic game where Seattle needed the plays that Tyler Lockett makes on a game-to-game basis. This was just one of those games where Lockett's going to show up, he's going to be clutch, and he makes that one-handed catch on 3rd and 6 to close out the game. I mean, it's just an incredible play by him. Really, really tight window as well by Geno Smith to be able to fit that ball in there, but an even better catch by Lockett. He obviously leads the team 6 catches, 77 yards. He had to get the game ball. He got the closer game ball from the team as well. Much deserved from him. And it's just really nice to see him still producing in this offense. He's clearly not an afterthought. He still might maintain that wide receiver 2 role. We'll see. We saw a couple of back-to-back receptions by Jackson Smith-Njigba there in the first half. And that's where I first thought the offense was coming to life a little bit, but that didn't quite happen how we expected. Either way, got to give Lockett his credit. He's always clutch, man. He's always clutch.
He is, and he's one of those players. He hasn't been out there in practice. He's been dealing with a thigh injury, but as Geno Smith was talking about today in the post game, he's a different dude when it's game day. He's talking trash to defensive linemen, and I could tell you that happens. I have seen it happen on the field where tiny little Tyler Lockett he goes up and starts talking trash to 320-pound defensive linemen. Yeah, it's how tough a guy he is. But that one-handed grab at the end of the game, what a phenomenal catch. And it was a great throw, too, just getting it out of the reach of the defender in front and being able to close the game out so they can take a couple knees and get that victory for Mike Macdonald. I got to stick with Ken Walker III, though. I mean, nobody was more of a catalyst for the Seahawks overcoming that putrid first half than number 9 was. And we got to see the jitterbug that he is, the powerful jitterbug, the guy that could make players miss, the ability to bounce outside and be able to outrun defenders, which is something a lot of NFL backs, even the athletes that they are not able to do. And sometimes Ken Walker III gets burned by that because he tries to do it too much. But in today's game, was able to get to the sideline, show off that burst, gets that 23-yard touchdown run, 84 rushing yards in the second half. He was phenomenal today and gave the Seahawks a real lift when they needed that toughness. They needed him to be a beast, as Geno Smith described him, and that's what he did today. He put up a really impressive stat line. And those of you watching on YouTube, you can see one of the pictures that I posted here. I love the power that we saw from Ken Walker III. Like, we saw a couple nasty stiff arms. We saw him. He wasn't just making guys miss with his elusiveness. We got to see some of that chip on his shoulder, physicality. There was more of a dose of that in today's game, and I felt like it really rubbed off on his teammates. And you started to see the offensive line block harder because they're like, look at what Ken Walker III's doing. He is warding off tacklers. He's getting yards on his own. Let's help him out. And I felt like the defense continued to respond to that too. He was a tone setter for this team. So while Tyler Lockett, I thought, had a really good game, to me, Ken Walker III, you don't win this football game without the contributions he made for them in the second half to really jumpstart this offense. Now let's go to the defensive side of the football. And this is one that I really wanted to give it to 2 different players, but I'm going to let you have one and I'll go with the other.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I was going to pick Ken Walker if you didn't pick Ken Walker, Corbin. So I let you have him. Now I got Tyler Lockett, and now I'm going to take Julian Love on the defense side of the ball just because, look, this man got paid this offseason, 3-year, $33 million extension, and he looked like he was worth every single penny in this one, Corbin. He was just flying around the field, both him and Rayshon Jenkins. It was tough to give it to him or Jenkins. It was just, I mean, these safeties are coached so well. You can tell just by the way that they're positioned. Tyrell Dodson talked about it in his post-game presser, particularly just on the safeties of these safeties have confidence to come down and make these tackles near the line of scrimmage in this scheme because they know that either the linebackers, the defensive linemen, somebody's there to support them. And that's all coaching, right, Corbin? That's all the way that this is schemed up to make these guys feel comfortable, the communication, everything else. It all trickles down into how this defense is going to operate. And Julian Love looks really comfortable in this scheme. I mean, he looks like he's having fun out there. He's hitting people. He's getting tackles for loss. And that's what I was saying earlier, Corbin, is just you don't necessarily want to see your free safety making 10 solo tackles. But when you look at that box score, it's much different than what you saw in the actual game of these are not Julian Love having to make a touchdown saving tackle, you know, deep in the secondary, second, third level, whatever it is. This is Julian Love being near the line of scrimmage, making this play and putting a run stop, I think as PFF would call it, right? That's a stop for a negative play, essentially. It's everything for this defense, and you can tell the confidence was just oozing out of this man today. Yeah,
he had a pick near the end zone. He had a forced fumble that was a lucky bounce that went back into a Broncos player's hands. He had 11 tackles, and a number of those were up near the line of scrimmage. There was a couple of times he blew up screens that the Broncos tried to run. I mean, those are plays you want your free safety to be making. It's not like he was, as you said, he wasn't racking up a bunch of tackles 20 yards downfield. These were impact plays. I'm going to go with another player in the secondary, though, simply because the play that he made, and it was the talk of the post game, really the 2 things that we're talking about the most, Ryan Grubb's adjustments and Reek Woolen's interception that he made on a crossing route. And again, this is something, there might be 1 or 2 other corners in the NFL, in today's NFL, that can do this. They have the speed to do it. If you have a guy that beats you inside on a crossing pattern, the ability to catch up with them and get out in front so you can pick off a pass, especially on a bootleg going the other direction, like that just doesn't happen. And yet now we've seen Reek Woolen do this multiple times in regular season games. He did it against the Lions for a pick 6 his rookie year. And then today, I think today's play was even more impressive because Woolen's play against the Lions in the middle of the field, this was all the way over past the left hash mark. And Reek Woolen was able to, I mean, Julian Love said this after the game that he thought he had an interception. His eyes were getting big. And then suddenly here comes Reek Woolen with his 4.2 speed coming in front of him and picks off the pass, coming all the way from the other side in man coverage. He also had another pass breakup in the end zone. Really didn't give up anything in the passing game. He had a dominant training camp, and he continued it today. I think Reek Woolen is going to have a special season as long as he stays healthy. He is looking motivated, and he wants to show everybody that last year was a fluke, and he can get back to playing the way he did as a rookie, if not better. He just looks like he is a better player than even right now, and he's really meshing with Mike Macdonald's defense. Real quick, special teams. There were certainly some miscues, as we'll get to here in a few minutes on special teams, but there also were some standout plays. It was a very mixed bag for Jay Harbaugh, but there's plenty of positives to glean from this game on the third phase.
Yeah, and obviously Jason Myers just, it's an easy one. It's an easy pick. I understand, 2 field goals. He was 2 for 2, got the 3 extra points. But here's the thing, Corbin. This game was so up and down. The fact that they were able to rely on Jason Myers to get the points when they needed them. That's huge. If Jason Myers misses one of those field goals, you never know, or even the extra points later in the game, you don't know how this game's going to go. So the fact that you had a reliable kicker there, ready to make those kicks, it's an even year. So let's just be thankful for that. I don't know if that's going to play the same way the rest of the stretch here for the next, the rest of the season and everything else. But at least today, Seattle had Jason Myers on their side, and I'm sure that they're happy about that, especially in the first half.
I want to give Derek Young some flowers, too. He had 2 really nice open field tackles on punts, and that's one of the reasons that he is on this roster. He is one of Seattle's best special teams players, and these were not like 15 yards into the return tackles. Like, these were right at the point of attack, open field tackles, and those are really hard to make on punt team, and yet Derek Young consistently has made these plays on special teams since he came into the league as a 7th rounder out of Lenore Ryan a couple years ago. So he is my selection, but I agree with you. Jason Myers really was a difference maker in a game like this, especially when you lost some points at one point, missing the 2-point conversion and then giving the points up to the Broncos with the safeties and the interception. All those gift wrap points. It was nice to have Jason Myers converting every opportunity he had, including a 50-yard field goal. Okay, let's switch gears now here to tie things up here in our first post-game episode of Locked On Seahawks. We are going to shift gears now to 3 Up, 3 Down, our weekly stock watch. And it's interesting, Connor, you and I, we've kind of taken some liberty with this compared to earlier seasons on this show where we're finding some different reasons for putting guys on either one of the lists. But let's start up with the 3 up here, the players who starred today that didn't get game balls but were worthy of recognition. Who's a player that jumps out to you and why?
Yeah, Zach Charbonnet's got to be the first one off the top, just because he did have that touchdown catch from Geno Smith. Really a beautiful, it wasn't anything super fancy, Corbin, if we're being honest here. It really was just a little wheel route. He got lost behind a couple of Denver defenders there as sort of a last-ditch effort there for Geno. But, hey, Geno found him. He was wide open. Everybody was playing shallow. Zach got behind him. He was able to pull it in. There you go. That's it. But, the biggest thing is Zach Charbonnet just plays such a key role on this team as a change of pace back. And his stats may have not looked great today, but that's going to come in handy down the line. Especially there late in the first half, you saw them just putting Zach Charbonnet in just to see if we can get anything going here. And he did get a couple of positive gains where Ken Walker was not. So there's a lot of upside there for Zach Charbonnet. Even though it didn't pop today, I'm just glad that he's on the Seahawks and he's going to be able to be a big contributor here down the line.
I'm going to go over to the defensive side of the football because, look, we've talked about this in earlier episodes. I thought Boye Mafe had kind of an underwhelming training camp. Now, his preseason games were pretty good. The training camp practices, though, he had his share of struggles, particularly when he was in one-on-ones. And I was wondering, is he going to be able to replicate the numbers that he had last year? I thought number 53 was incredibly disruptive today. He had his first sack of the season. He chased down. Bo Nix showed this late in the game. Bo Nix can run away from people. He's got athleticism. And yet Boye Mafe at 260 pounds hunted him down from behind and was able to get to him in the sideline for a 6-yard sack in the second quarter. beginning of the third quarter, gets a 4-yard tackle for loss against a run play on Javonte Williams, just blew him up in the backfield, not just setting the edge, destroying the edge and getting into the backfield. Had a couple other quarterback hits. I counted 5 pressures. There may have been more when I go back and watch the tape, but he was consistently chasing after Bo Nix and making life tough for him on those rollouts. And when he was trying to scramble, which is a big part of his game, to improvise, extend plays, Boye Mafe was making it. He didn't have clean windows to throw the football, and he was disruptive from start to finish. So really excited about that, to see how he and Derek Hall both played in this game. And that was easily the best we've seen him play without Uchenna Nwosu. They obviously need Nwosu back to reach their potential, but it's really exciting to see both these young players step up in pass rushing and run defense and play really well in this football game.
Yeah, Boye Mafe was one that I think a lot of people were surprised by whenever they saw Draymond Jones higher on the depth chart, right? Like, that was kind of a shocker. I think I even texted you about it once, Corbin, like, hey, what's going on here, man? Like, what do you know what's going on here? And I mean, you said, I think at that point that it was kind of the plan the whole time, and it makes sense because they just have so many. It's really the top 4 edge rushers that are really solid at this point. And Boye Mafe is showing that he can kind of be that change of pace guy to come in there and switch things up. And he proved that today again. I mean, he's a starting caliber edge rusher in this league. It's just about how many snaps is he going to get in this pretty top heavy edge rushing group. Kayvon Wallace, though, forced fumble, man was shot out of a cannon on that play where Jerome Baker fumbled that thing. I mean, I thought he was going to miss him at first, Corbin, whenever I saw him flying onto the screen. You were at the game, probably looked a little bit different to you. But for me, watching on a TV screen, I'm like, oh, Kayvon Wallace is about to fly by this man. Next thing you know, he hits him in just the right spot to force that fumble. Jerome Baker falls on it. That's a pivotal moment in that game. And overall, Kayvon Wallace has that third safety. We've talked about it all offseason, Corbin, that Mike Macdonald is going to use 3 safeties a lot. And Kayvon Wallace has been on the rise through the preseason. He's been getting a little bit more pop here and there. And he showed up in his limited opportunities today. He showed up and made a big play for this Seahawks defense. And I think this is just the mentality of this team, is like, if you're on the field, you're going to be in a position to make a play. And Kayvon Wallace really showed that today. So I'm glad he's on this list too.
Yeah, I think we got to have him and Rayshawn Jenkins. You could put all 3 safeties here. I mean, Rayshawn Jenkins was delivering the wood today. I mean, he was smacking people. Clean hits, but he was mashing people. You can use him up near the line of scrimmage, and you can see the instincts. He was consistently where he needed to be to make plays. But both he and Wallace, and Julian Love was talking about this a little bit. Tyrell Dodson was talking about this today, that it's about the pursuit angles and how much they have worked on that. You could see that today, the open field tackling and coming up and getting to people, punching the ball out. They've been working on that a lot as well. And Kayvon Wallace is putting everything they've been working on into practice. So it was really exciting to see the way that the safeties played today, not just giving up any big plays in coverage, but what they were doing against run, against screen plays, coming up and not missing very many opportunities when they had their tackle chances. They were making plays across the board. So let's give love to all 3 of those Seahawks safeties. Now let's go to the 3 down. And Connor, this is where you and I are taking some liberty with this. I'm actually going to put a player who played well in 3 down, and I have to explain my rationale behind this. Devin Witherspoon made plenty of plays in this game, and nobody was getting catches on him. You know, he was really, really good in coverage. He had a couple of pressures, but here's why I have Devin Witherspoon on 3 down. It's the expectations. We expect Devin Witherspoon is going to be a superstar. He had 3 interceptions in his hands today and was not able to reel in any of them. And then Bo Nix's touchdown near the end, he had a chance to tackle him and whiffed on it with just a bad missed arm tackle. Those are plays you do not expect your superstar corner to miss. And so that's why I have him on the 3 down. I still think he played pretty well. But again, this is about expectations. We're talking about Devin Witherspoon.
Yeah, it's early season form, and I totally get it here. I'm in agreement with you, Corbin, that I think that the way that we frame this can be very different depending on the situations and what players we're talking about. I don't know if people are going to get upset about it, but honestly, they shouldn't if they actually listen to what we're saying here. Devin Witherspoon did not have a bad game by any means. He put himself in position to make plays the whole time. The only thing is, let's capitalize on those plays. You're supposed to be the star and the leader of this defense, and you still are as a former number 5 overall pick. But let's just finish some of those plays. You know, I think he's talked about it through the offseason too. If there's some other plays that I wanted to make that I didn't make, things like that. And so that's one of the ones where, you know, we're not actually bashing him here. It's just like, hey, Devin, maybe
He had a
pull that
sack
one
that
in.
he had slip out of his hands too. That
Yeah, he was close.
There were
He
some
was
missed
really
plays.
close.
That's all I'm saying. And again, this is more me saying it's expectations. We expect him to be a superstar, and he made a lot of good plays today. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he was a problem because he played pretty well. It's just, hey, maybe this is some motivation for you. Go out and get some of those interceptions when they're in your hands. Finish those sacks. We expect those kind of plays from him.
Yeah, and I could not agree with you more. I think the one that we're not necessarily framing the same way here, Corbin, is Anthony Bradford on the offensive line. This is one that has been controversial just throughout the offseason of, is he going to maintain his starting role? Is Christian Haynes going to slot in? I mean, there's so many different guard setups. Well, I shouldn't say so many different. That might be a wrong way to put it, but there's the guard setups of, is Laken Tomlinson going to start at left guard? Is Christian Haynes going to start at left guard and Anthony Bradford start at right guard? Is Christian Haynes going to take over Anthony Bradford's right guard spot? Like, there's been so much talk about what Seattle's going to do at the right guard spot and just the guard spots in general. And today, especially in the first half, I think there was a lot of people, including myself, calling for, let's just see what Christian Haynes can do, right? Like, I mean, it couldn't get any worse than what Anthony Bradford is doing right now at the right guard spot. And I mean, Laken Tomlinson wasn't great as well throughout the game, and then when Stone Forsythe came in, that right side got even worse in the first half. Things got cleaned up in the second half, as we've already talked about. But overall, I just did not really like what I saw from Anthony Bradford when he got in space, whenever he was pulling and things like that. Things got a little bit better, and I think that's just because you've got other guys running with you. You're able to find guys a little bit easier. You're not just jumping off the ball and trying to hit a guy in his face. There's a lot of different nuance to offensive line play of setting guys up for success. So I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I am curious to see what they do going forward, Corbin, of, are we going to shake this up, or are we going to leave things the way that they are and kind of go off of the second half was a lot better? Can we build off that, right?
Yeah, the safeties, both of the safeties in the first half, Anthony Bradford was the main culprit for them happening. He had the hold that automatically, by NFL rules, if it happens in the end zone, it's a safety, and that was a blatant hold. It was egregious. They had to throw the flag on that one. I mean, he basically had both hands completely clenching the guy, and it was so obvious. Anybody in the stands could have seen that was a hold. And the second play, Zach Charbonnet gets hit and isn't able to get out of the end zone with the football. Anthony Bradford got beat by Zach Allen on that play. So he really was the main culprit on both. Now, I will say this. He had some really nice run blocks in the second half, and the Seahawks were able to get their run game going a lot in favor of that right side of the line because of the blocks that were being made by Anthony Bradford. So I thought he played a lot better in the second half, but certainly the first half was a real struggle with the penalties and missed blocks, and leading to both of those safeties. There's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up on that front, and Christian Haynes may get his opportunity sooner rather than later if he's not able to play more consistently. And the last person on here, look, I don't want to pick on D. Williams too much because, look, he's an undrafted rookie. It was his first NFL game. There's jitters, but he muffed a punt in the second quarter that led to a field goal. Give the Seahawks defense credit again. They did not give up a touchdown with that short field, but it resulted in 3 more gifted points. 10 of the 13 points that Denver scored in the first half were strictly off mistakes that the Seahawks made and just gift wrapped the points, either on offense or special teams. Williams also had a couple other punts where it looked like he was uncertain whether he's supposed to be calling for a fair catch or let the ball get by him. One of those got down to the 1 and resulted in a safety. So it was not necessarily a pretty game for D. Williams in an NFL debut, but Mike Macdonald, teammates, all those guys were patting his back. They still have a ton of confidence in him. It just was kind of a rough game, but nonetheless, he's got to be on this list with the mistakes that he made.
Yeah, I don't want to pick on him either, but I think it was ESPN's Brady Henderson who tweeted that he committed the 3 cardinal sins of punt returns, where first of all, you don't call for the fair catch inside of the 10-yard line, then you muff the punt, then you try and pick it up instead of fall on it. I mean, those are the 3 things you can do wrong when trying to catch a punt in that zone. And again, there was a roster spot most likely preserved for D. Williams to be mostly returner. So I think that there is some legitimacy for us to be able to say, look, dude, you got to be able to do your job here, right? Like that is your job. Yep. We don't know how much we're going to see you on defense here. You need to be able to do your job. And that's a critical point where Seahawks are trailing 5-3 in one of the weirdest scores I've seen at that point in the game, by the way, Corbin. I mean, I was thinking about it the whole game. I'm like, when have I ever seen a game sit at 5-3? This just doesn't happen. But anyways, you give them the ball there. Luckily, the defense is able to come up and make that play, but that is a critical mistake. If they go in there and get a touchdown, all of a sudden you're looking at 13-3 game in that point, or 12-3 game, unless they go for 2. It could be a huge swing in that game, and luckily the defense stood tall. But look, D. Williams, you got to catch the ball, man. That's what it comes down to.
You have a very small margin for error when you are a kick and punt returner. Like, you have got one job. You got to catch the football. That's the most important job that you have. And if you muff the punts, look, that's one that they're going to say, okay, let's move on from it. It's okay. We believe in you. If something like that happens again, then we're going to be looking for who else can do this job if you can't do it. So it's the way the business works. Unfortunately, you have a small leash. I still think this kid is a dynamic athlete. He's a dynamic returner. He recovered from that and had clean catches the rest of the game, but you can't have that happen, especially deep in your territory like that. You can't give good football teams. Denver did not look like a good one today, but you cannot give good football teams those kind of breaks, or they are going to punch in the end zone, and you are going to end up losing because of that mistake. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Connor at C. John Benintendi. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we return on Monday, I'll be rejoined by Rob Rang, our first Monday musings of the 2024 regular season. We're going to take a deep dive into some of our film observations and much more. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Go Hawks.